Hi, I'm Scott Stripling from the Bible Seminary, and welcome to our First Fridays podcast. I have with me today a friend and colleague, Paige Brevick, and Paige is actually in Minnesota this morning, and she's going to be coming in to do a really exciting seminar with us in February, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, Paige, welcome to First Fridays podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Why are you in Minnesota?
I grew up in Minnesota. I'm actually from a really small town called Chatfield, so pretty close to the Iowa border. And I've been in Minnesota for a while now. I love it here. I love rural living.
Are you a farm girl?
You know what? I did grow up a farm girl. So I
Okay.
grew up outside, exploring the great outdoors, had a lot of animals. And I think maybe that's even part of why I ended up loving archaeology so much, right? We get to spend so much time outside in the dirt. So I love it here.
That's awesome. So tell us real quickly your journey. You did your BA where?
I did my bachelor's degree actually in religion at Cornell College in Iowa. So I
Okay.
went in Mount Vernon, Iowa. It's a small college town, very beautiful. And then I finished my master's degree in Egyptian art and archaeology at the University of Memphis.
And your PhD, you're like at the very final stage, right? About to cross the finish line. Is that right?
That's what I'm telling myself. Yes, I am in the final stages here now. I think I have about a year and a half or so left, and I'm just working on my dissertation now. So I've got to wrap up a few case studies, and I just have to write the whole thing now. So that's where I'm at.
So we have a world-class museum here in Houston, the Houston Museum of Natural Science. And when I found out that you had worked at the museum and that you knew the Egyptology collection so well, I thought this is perfect because we'd been wanting to do an Egyptology seminar for the benefit of our archaeology students and our broader academic faith community as well. So
Mhm.
tell us how you know the exhibit here so well.
So, my dissertation is actually on Egyptian galleries that have undergone these redesigns over the last 10 years or so. There's been a lot of reflection on how we can update how we present and talk about ancient civilization, and certainly Egypt is kind of at the forefront of that. And so the museum here in Houston actually underwent a very serious redesign of their entire Egyptian galleries. They've been redesigning several of their galleries. And so in 2021, they actually reopened this incredible, beautiful, very interactive space. It's over, I think, 10,000 square feet of gallery. So it's huge. So if you haven't been there yet, anyone out there listening, it's quite a gem just to walk through. So they have kind of their main gallery space, and then they also have an additional Tomb of Tutankhamun reconstruction kind of experiential space as well, which I think it was meant to be temporary, but I know it's so well loved they've considered even keeping it there permanently. So that'll be exciting, and we can incorporate that as well in the class. But because of this, I've traveled to Houston a couple times now, actually hoping to use this gallery as a case study. So I'm looking at how they have changed the signs, what objects they've chosen, that kind of object text relationship, and really what is the story of ancient Egypt presented, and how are they using objects and archaeology to do that in Houston. So it's a really unique example. It's kind of different from my other case studies. So I'm excited to be able to share some of that in person with the students actually in Houston.
And so your angle is curatorship, right? I mean, so
Mhm.
you're looking at how do you get best practices in curating collections? Is that
Yeah, I would say I think that's probably a good summary of it. So essentially looking at what is that curatorial agency within the collection, and whose voice is really present. What are the stories being told? I think that objects don't speak for themselves, right? We speak for them, and we give that history to them. And so I think that that's so exciting to see how those things change, and how objects, even something that we might take for granted, like a coffin, can actually be representative of so much more than just the afterlife, right? It can mean so much more. And so it's to kind of see what that new narrative and those new sets of stories are emerging in the museum
Hmm.
space.
for those of us who are interested, like my primary area of research focus is the conquest, which synchronizes with the 18th dynasty in Egypt. And so when we're talking about Tutankhamun and artifacts from that period, it's especially helpful to me and to my students because we do put a lot of study into 18th dynasty. So are we going to see some cool stuff at the seminar?
Yes, we absolutely are. They have a very large New Kingdom collection. There's a lot there from sort of the first half and middle part of Dynasty 18. So I think that'll quite fascinate you. I was even getting a list together just a few days ago. So there's quite a lot of interesting material that we will cover. I don't want to give away too much of the class, but I'm hoping that we can even do kind of a label rewrite project, go through and find new ways that we can talk about the same object and kind of give that power back to the voice that we give those objects.
It's a good thing that we love archaeology and Egyptology because we're doing it on February 14th, which is Valentine's Day.
Yes.
And just that was a good day on everybody's calendar, and we love it. So we're going to do it that day. The seminar is going to start at, let me make sure I've got it right. Check-ins at 9 in the morning. We actually start at 9:30 and we'll go till about 3:30 in the afternoon. So we've got a good 6 hours there at the museum. We have classroom space. We actually have the double classroom. So we have a capacity of 30, 35 face-to-face students that day. And I'm pretty sure we'll pack it out. And then we'll have some virtual students as well. So people, we're actually going next week. Blake and I are to work out with them the technology of how that's going to work.
Good.
When we go in. Who knows? We may have you wired in some way when we go up to the collection so that people who are online can see. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, that would be lovely. It's quite an exploratory experience going through the gallery, the way that they've redesigned it. When you are at the entrance to it, the kind of experience of ancient Egypt happens before you even walk into that space, right? Where they have that digital timeline that's moving. You see the sun setting over the Nile River, and there's the sounds, right, of birds and animals along that Nile River Valley, the wildlife there. And then when you enter into the gallery, there's actually, right, the pillars that represent the hypostyle hall, walking through. And I really love when you're going through the hall, there's almost like a progression of time, right? So we have kind of big picture time, though those pillars look more and more decayed as you go down the middle of that hall. And then the lighting there, it seems like you go from daytime to nighttime. And I think that'll be really fun to be able to talk about that while being actually in the gallery. So hopefully we can have something set up so that our virtual students can kind of walk along with us and have at least some element of that same experience.
So we have up on the screen the information right now where folks can register. So just come to our website, thebibleseminary.edu, but you can see it there on the screen. And it's $89 incidentally, which is think of all the dumb things people spend $89 on. This is the best money that they could ever spend. If someone wanted to prepare in advance, like how can I get the most out of the seminar? What are some things they could do in advance?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say I tried to take the seminar very much based on objects and archaeology, right? The material kind of context of the things that we're looking at, since it is taking place in a museum. So we're going to talk about the stuff, right? The fantastic stuff that's there. So I would say to try to look at a book that maybe has a lot of material and technology in it. So there's a few good textbooks out there. It might also be good to look at Gay Robbins' art history textbook, The Chronology of Ancient Egypt. I think that would also be a good one to prepare, just so that students have sort of the visual history of ancient Egypt as well in mind when we're walking through the gallery. I think it's good to have an idea, of those changes in style over time.
We'll order Robin's book and have it here in our library, so students who want to peruse it ahead of time will be able to do that as well.
Okay, fantastic.
I know not all of these books are cheap.
No, they're not. There might be a version of that one online by now. We'll have to see, but it's always worth it just to have a sense of that. I'm trying to set the class up so that even if you are not super familiar with ancient Egypt necessarily, you're still going to feel like you can fully participate. But having at least an idea of some of the major time periods and major kind of shifts there would be helpful, of course.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Right now at the Bible Seminary, we're shaping biblical leaders for a life of purpose, powerful leadership, and lasting legacy.
The Bible Seminary is holding a unique role in America and in the world as being a place that is firmly committed to the Bible.
That process of really digging deep into the Word of God and then applying those principles to your life, and that's invaluable to me.
And the focus on spiritual growth, not just learning facts about the Bible, but how can you really apply this to your life?
Is because more than any other institution I've ever been a part of, it does feel like a family.
My relationship with God is different. My ministries are all significantly different. And how I approach the Bible is different.
Whether you're a ministry leader, college student, a pastor, or someone eager to deepen your knowledge of God's Word, there's a place for you. Start your journey today. Let's rejoin the conversation.
So before we get into the different categories that we're going to cover that day, just to make sure that it's clear, for TBS students, you can get modular credit. You can, even if you're not an archaeology student, you can still apply this as an intensive modular credit toward completion of ELE 501. And then, of course, folks can just audit it, and just people are super interested in learning. But for our TBS guys, this is a great opportunity to pick up modular credit. Okay, let's look at the 4 categories that you're going to focus on that day. Number 1, animal life in ancient Egypt. All right, so I'm thinking hippopotamuses and crocodiles and so forth. So what are we going to learn in that section?
Well, certainly those are included. I'd say those are some of our main characters when it comes to animal life in ancient Egypt, right? But we're going to try to really look at ancient Egypt from that natural history kind of perspective, right? Where are the materials coming from? What are the resources that we're looking at? And how does that change over time as ancient Egypt expands as a civilization? Obviously, it's a very long-standing culture, so over a very vast period of time, and also the empire changes a lot, and certainly with trade with other nations as well. So we'll look at some examples in the art, and then we'll walk through the museum and have examples of how those objects kind of have been formed, both from material aspect and also images. I'm also hoping that we can talk a little bit about animal mummies. There are several at the Houston Museum. Cool. That'll be nice to be able to talk about that production and what those mean as an object class.
Which ones do they have?
They have some that I don't even believe are out yet, but they have a hawk, and then they also have an ibis mummy as well. And then they have examples of victual mummies, which are food offerings left behind to kind of sustain the dead in the afterlife.
I led a tour of Egypt 4 or 5 years ago, which was a blast. But one of my favorite places was the temple of the crocodile mummies. Like just this whole temple with crocodile mummies blew my mind.
Oh, nice. Yes. There's several temples there. The crocodile mummy temple, though, is incredible. And actually, there's even examples of mummified crocodiles where they've mummified the young, like, hatchlings and placed them back in the mother's mouth. And I think that's such an interesting commentary on their relationship with the natural world, though, right? Because they're observing this kind of, if you can call that, maternal behavior in this crocodile along the Nile River, and recognizing that need to emulate that in the next world. So it's very interesting.
So we'll learn about some different animals and hopefully recognize them in like cartouches and symbols, and learn some of what they meant in iconography, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, what about religion? Religion, mythology. Give us an idea of what we're going to cover there.
Oh, it's such a big topic, right? We could have an entire semester course on this and changing perspectives. So we're going to try to do almost like a sampler style there, really focusing, of course, on the objects that are there in Houston and kind of have those lead our discussions. But we'll go over some ideas, a couple of the creation myths and how these overlap with other cultural worldviews at that time, and our evidence per se of how that story is conveyed then in the art and the objects there in Houston. And then we'll go through and we'll talk about a handful of gods and goddesses and how those changed over time, what their role was, kind of to give an outline, right, of that mythological element. And hopefully we'll also talk about my favorite goddess, which is the Egyptian goddess Serket. Are you familiar with Serket? Sometimes she's called Salket too.
No, please tell me.
She is the Egyptian scorpion goddess, right? So she's
Oh,
kind of a protector, a healer. I think she's technically the goddess of venomous, like spiders and scorpions and snakes, but she protects you from them. So
interesting.
she's depicted as a scorpion, but they've drawn her in a way to render her, right, kind of harmless. So the scorpion is wearing bracelets and she doesn't actually have a stinger. And she's also associated with the canopic jars. They do have a few collections of those there in Houston, so we'll see some references to her as we walk through the gallery.
This could be a Hollywood movie, okay? The Scorpion Queen. This is great. Or
Yeah,
a Marvel sort of hero, the Scorpion Queen.
could be, yes.
What about Khanum, like the creator god Khanum? Well, we learned some about the idea of the potter's wheel and how he forms
Yes,
humans and
yes.
so forth.
Yes, absolutely. We will. There's certainly a couple objects in the collection. I think we can tie back directly to that story. And certainly, there's also an element there of the animal mummy, right? Because of these rams that are associated with him that come
Right.
about, and that's maybe more of a later period topic in Egyptian history, but certainly very interesting to see the connection between, right, religious perspective and then applied practice, and then the objects we have today.
I once excavated a ram's head that had been decapitated. So I didn't have the body, but you could see the cut marks and then where it was decapitated. And I thought it was probably Khanum, and maybe it was associated with the Israelites defiling the idols when they came into the land or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
always been interesting in Khanum.
Oh, interesting.
Tell us about the stars, astronomy, cosmology, because they're
Yes.
inexorably connected with the Egyptians' religious beliefs.
Yes, they absolutely are. They are, and there's so much connection there too. Also, when we're looking at chronologies and timelines and trying to line things up with the solar and lunar calendar, and even the civic calendar, right, in ancient Egypt. So day to day life. There's I think kind of an overlap there with the mythology and how that's being practiced. So we'll talk a bit about evidence there. Look also at kind of the science and mathematical perspective that they're embracing in ancient Egypt and how that changes over time.
A lot of our students are biblical studies majors, and then we have archaeology students who also take required kind of core theology courses as well. So we're really interested in that interface between Bible and archaeology. So talk to us a little bit about that. The Old Testament history, Egyptian history. What are the connections?
There's many connections I think we could take. We're going to try to start, I think, maybe from a daily life perspective as well, just so that we can incorporate a lot of those objects in the collection. They have a nice collection of lamps as well. And I think that this is also where language comes to play, where we're looking at the development of writing in ancient Egypt and kind of the influence there, and some of the elements that we see even today between Middle Egyptian and this idea of Hebrew and ancient Hebrew. And then we will also look a bit at the Exodus and go through some of the discussion there. It seems like just about every pharaoh has had an argument made for being the pharaoh of the Exodus, but we'll go over kind of what my perspective is on that, and maybe what I think some of the stronger contenders are, and then we will of course associate that conversation back with some of the objects, and we'll see if anyone feels brave enough to kind of make an argument there. Perhaps in class. I hope so.
That would be fun. You can just throw people out of class and
no.
Or you may have a mass exodus from class. I don't know.
Exodus from class. I hope not. I think it's a fun and certainly very rewarding discussion, and it's nice to be able to see that, of course, from the museum perspective, right? Because that is kind of where we have those conversations coming out that the public interacts with, right? That's where that kind of dialogue begins. I think a lot of people also kind of fall in love with the idea of ancient history and archaeology in a museum setting. And so when we're talking about something as important as Bible history, I think that narrative kind of matters.
How many symbols, glyphs, if you will, are there in Middle Egyptian? Is it like 500? What's the number approximately?
I think that it is. I think it's around 500. It might be even a little bit more than that. Of course, when we get into combinations and we're doing combinations of signs and glyphs, the number is higher. But quite a few. I'd say that.
So, if Moses were trying to write the Pentateuch with Middle Egyptian, I'm going to assume that Moses knew Middle Egyptian, and I think he probably also knew early Hebrew, or what we would call a proto-alphabetic kind of a script. But let's say he was going to try to write the Pentateuch in Middle Egyptian. Would it have taken a long time and a lot of space?
Yes, I would say so. Certainly Middle Egyptian, yes. I'm sure it would have been very beautiful, though, right? That link to image and text is such an amazing one in ancient Egypt. I think that is something that it isn't discussed enough in terms of, I think, art and historical classes, but that link is so important.
What is your favorite thing about Egypt? Is just one thing that you've learned that just sets you on fire?
My favorite thing about Egypt, I think for me, just right off the top of my head, probably would be the connection between the natural landscape and the people and how that changes over time. So to be able to thinking in terms of what ancient Egypt, that landscape actually looks like, right? There's kind of this myth that it's all just sand and desert. But actually, right, it was very green and fertile, the Nile River. And to think about being able to settle in such a part of the world that's so predictable in a sense with the flooding, and to have that relationship with the water and the plants, and then to go out and traverse the desert and return. I really like that idea and how that comes out in certainly the language, the glyphs, the art, and the material culture, and then over time how they incorporate that certainly into their worldviews and mythology.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because we have even branches of the Nile, like I'm thinking of the Pelusiac branch of the Nile, for example, that's now dry, but you can see it from satellite images. And wow, that's where ancient Avaris was, and these major civilizations. And so to understand climate change and how it has happened over the millennia and how that affected human civilization, and the climate being conducive to the preservation of papyri.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just astounding.
Mm-hmm.
Think about Oxyrhynchus, the cases and cases that are still awaiting examination. No telling what is waiting for us there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much awaiting investigation, even in the storerooms too. So I agree with you there.
Yeah, I just love the story of Grenfell and Hunt and how they go and kind of recognize stratigraphy within the garbage dump, and it's just of course we archaeologists love garbage, so
yes, we do.
It's a great story.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so if someone does not sign up for this seminar, he or she will hate the rest of his or her life because
well, you're missing out on such a great conversation, right? I think that to be able to talk about ancient Egypt, even in just kind of a sampling, kind of broad strokes way, is so exciting. And to be able to have this idea of the museum, the curator, the archaeologist, and also the biblical perspective being interwoven with more contemporary Egyptology. It's going to be hopefully a really good discussion. So don't miss the class. So really would love to have as many people sign up as possible.
So world-class exhibit and the opportunity to interact with that. Incidentally, that $89, that includes lunch and snacks and all the ancillary costs and so forth. So once someone registers, then we'll send you a follow-up email that'll have details about where to park and when to arrive, and all the things that will go with that. There are only 30 spots. And so these face-to-face spots, once this podcast drops, they're going to go like that. So if someone's watching this, then I hope that they'll act fast. If not, they'll probably end up participating virtually.
Lovely. Hope to see a lot of you there.
Well, Paige, thank you for being a guest on our First Fridays podcast. There's a lot of buzz here at TBS about the upcoming seminar. We appreciate your time, and we're looking forward to February the 14th.
Thank you. Looking forward to being there.
Thanks for joining us on the TBS Podcast. To keep up with our latest insights and episodes, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us bring you more engaging content. See you next time for more exciting discussions.